You're listening to Roadway Guru, and today we're going to get into some of the weirdest Hondas sold around the globe. Let's get into it. First up for weird Hondas, we got the Honda EV Plus. Now this car was made from 97 to 99, and Honda basically with this car, their plan was basically a corpo scheme to trial and test the new EVs that they're producing. And they had a few prototypes, and then basically a bunch of other companies during the 90s, they actually were coming out with these EVs. So this is basically Honda's step to the game. Now this car got an average range of only 80 miles, but you got a 49 kilowatt motor pushing 66 horsepower and 203 pound-feet of torque. Only using a single speed transmission to the front wheels, you're still going to get 0 to 30 in 4.9 seconds. Woo! Now this thing's really weird because it looks like a CRV in the back, but a Civic in the front. This car weighs in at 3,500 pounds, and with a top speed of 80 miles an hour, don't expect to be going anywhere anytime soon. Now, one thing that's really weird about this car was since Honda knew this was going to be a trial, they didn't offer the car to be bought. You could only lease the car under a contract ranging about $450 a month, but they included all of the maintenance, all of the roadside. Basically, you didn't have to worry about anything. They gave you the car, you paid the lease, you didn't have to worry about much. You just drove the car. You were essentially Honda's test rats, if you will. Honda didn't allow anybody to continue to buy this car. They actually ended up confiscating back after these leases were over all of these vehicles, and they ended up using a lot of them for their early hydrogen fuel cell prototypes and other EVs that they worked on. Now, a few things that make this car particularly weird was Honda only sold these cars mainly in California. We got 300 of them, while Japan got 20 and Europe got 5. Now that's really low production. Now Honda actually did race this car at the Pikes Peak 77th Annual International Hill Climb, and they fitted the car with the motor in the middle of the chassis and made it rear-wheel drive, so you could imagine that was a very fun car to drive. Now a few more other specs. You're going to get an 8-hour full charge on a 240 volt charger and 35-hour charge on a 120 volt charger. And this car had a MSRP of $53,999 for a car that went 80 miles an hour with 80 miles range. Next up on Weird Hondas, we got the Civic Type R FN2. Now, if you don't know anything about these cars, they're nothing to joke around about. They're nice race cars. They're meant for the track. They're meant to race. That's what they're designed for. They're meant to be fast Civics. Now, what makes this car kind of weird is just its design. This design was just out there. Straight up out there. It was weird. Honda did actually have a few other vehicles that looked similar, such as the JDM Honda Odyssey. But with a price tag of $30,000, that's not bad for what you're getting. You're getting a 198 horsepower K20Z4 motor by Honda, rated for 142 pound-feet of torque, and had a curb weight of 2,910 pounds. Now back to the design. The design is just so out there, like nothing ever seen before. It's almost spaceshipy. It's like it's something you would see the aliens coming to drive. It's just a really weird design. Debatably cool looking, yet still really weird. Now, they only sold these cars in Australia, Japan, Africa, South Asia, and select Euro countries, with the main one being the UK, hence them producing it there. Next up on Weird Hondas, we got the Honda Accord Wagon. Now, this car was produced from 93 to 97. The 5th generation Accord Wagon is one of my personal favorite Hondas. The silhouette of the body make for a clean, simple, yet sporty look on the road. Let me tell you, especially what I'm going to show you in a little bit. Now, these cars are a gem to see because the main one everybody wants, the manual transmission one, is very hard to come across. Now in America, you could expect to see the F22B1 engine capable of 148 horsepower and 146 foot-pounds of torque. This could get you up to 123 miles per hour top speed, So fun paired with the manual for sure. But what makes this car weird is that they offered a SiR version in Japan. And you can only get it at select dealerships that Honda allowed. Now, if you're lucky enough to come across the SiR version, you're going to get Honda's H22A motor that came in the Prelude, pushing 188 horsepower and 152 pound-feet of torque with a 5-speed manual or a 4-speed automatic that would get you up to 133 miles per hour top speed. But like I said, you can only get this at select dealerships in Japan, known as the Clio dealerships. Even though they are built in Ohio, Honda specifically marketed the version to its own domestic market with a price tag reaching above $20,000. Now, one thing that makes this Honda Accord wagon really weird is that Honda was actually in cahoots with USPS, the United States Postal Service, to make a bunch of these right-hand drive models for them to deliver with. And sadly, they didn't end up going with Honda. They ended up going with Jeep. But could you imagine seeing a bunch of those right-hand drive Accord wagons delivering mail? That would be cool. Now, next up on Weirdest Hondas, we have the Civic Wagon / Honda Shuttle. Now, this car was produced from 83 to 96. Now, the Civic is probably one of the most recognizable car names, and that's for a reason. These cars are robust, reliable, you name it, they're on the road. But what really stepped the Civic's game up was when they introduced the Honda Shuttle, which is basically the Civic wagon. Now this car is a game changer for Honda because it is the first Honda to offer four-wheel drive. Now, if you got the early versions of the Honda Civic wagon or Shuttle, you can expect a weird style. Honda also introduced a super low crawling gear for these Civics, making them extra capable off-road. Now, if you picked up the earlier models with the part-time four-wheel drive, you're going to get the EW1 1.5 liter Honda motor, which is going to give you about 118 horsepower and 105 pound-feet of torque. Now, if you picked up one of these once 87 came around, you're going to get the good one. This one came with real-time four-wheel drive, and it came with a ZC 1.6 liter, similar to the D16 series motor. Now, getting up to top speed of 115 in this Civic probably felt pretty stable with that four-wheel drive, I would imagine. Now, depending on the model you get, you're going to get an average curb weight of only 2,400 pounds. That's pretty freaking light. Now, the design is objectively ugly, but you're going to get a 6-speed manual, four-wheel drive Honda Civic for around $13,000 MSRP. That's a steal back in the day. And back when the utilization of all-wheel drive cars was coming into the game for like snow, etc., going in the mountains, this was the perfect timing for this car. Its utilization must have appeared quite attractive to buyers. It's super boxy, wacky looking, and if you're tall, you could only imagine how goofy but fun you're going to look driving this car. Now, next up on Weird Hondas is going to be a 4-in-1. That's going to be the Honda Accord CB and CC series, which were a series of cars Honda produced that were based on the Accord, but all had different names and slightly different specs, but cool ones. Now, these 4 cars are going to be the Honda Ascot, which was produced from 89 to 97, the Honda Rafaga, which was produced from 93 to 97, the Honda Inspire, which was produced from 89 to 95, and the Honda Vigor, which was produced from 89 to 95. Now, these cars are really weird because they're basically the same car. They all had very similar specs, yet they're trying to appeal to a different market for each specific car, which is super weird. Now, the type of customers these cars were attracting were really, I would assume, Japanese businessmen. You could only buy these cars in Japan. Besides for the Vigor, which you could get in an Acura in America, these cars were only allotted in Japan at specific dealerships, as I mentioned with the Honda Accord SiR. Now, these dealerships, like I mentioned earlier, Clio, there's also the Honda dealership Verno and Honda dealerships Primo. Now, these were all obviously a marketing scheme. Honda wanted to sell their cars at specific dealerships that were offering bougie Hondas, different outside of the box Hondas with fast motors and cool specs, nothing cookie cutter. This is not a game to Honda. They wanted to appeal to a specific market. Now these cars are really cool because they all came with a manual option, and you could get a 4-cylinder, 5-cylinder, or later even a 6-cylinder. Now could you guess what 6-cylinder they used in the Honda Aspire? The NSX motor. Not the same one, but the same series. You may be asking yourself, wait a minute, Honda made a 5-cylinder? They did. And this 5-cylinder is actually quite iconic because Honda has not used these 5-cylinders for quite some time. These motors were categorized under the G series motor, and you could get two options of this 5-cylinder, a 2-liter or a 2.5 liter. Now the specs on these cars with the 2-liter, you're going to get 158 horsepower, 137 pound-feet of torque, curb weight around 2,900 pounds. The 2.5 liter, you're going to get 177 horsepower and 167 pound-feet of torque. Now, some of the top metrics on these cars, you're going to get the 0 to 60 as low as 7.9 seconds, and you're going to get a top speed around 133, depending on which model you get, which trim you get, what options you get. There's a lot that go into these cars, which is why I put it on this list, because the amount of freaking options just makes it so weird. Like, why couldn't they just make more trim levels of the Accord? It makes sense. They wanted to appeal to a more classy, sophisticated audience. Now, if you really like these cars, get ready to import them, because you can import these cars, and I would say do it. They're super classy. They're kind of relative to the Toyota Cresta and the Nissan Laurel. Next up on the list, we have the Honda CRX Si by Straman. Now, this was a convertible that is really, really weird. Basically, this was a CRX convertible, but it wasn't OEM. In America, certain dealerships offered the CRX to be delivered to a separate company, the Straman Coachworks company, which would take the CRX and turn it in and fabricate it into a convertible. Now, this is definitely high on my list because you would never assume that anybody would make a CRX convertible. Now, I find these cars extremely cool, fun, and genuinely appealing. The design matched with the cut roof when the top is down. It's sleek and stylish, especially these days when retro design is back in. Now, if you fancy yourself to buy or own one of these vehicles, one can only imagine the amount of head turns you're going to get. Nobody's seen these things. I also think it'd be really refreshing to see manufacturers actually come out with cheap, affordable, sporty cars like this, because we want to have fun. Why are cars so bland? We want fun, weird cars. That's what I like as a car enthusiast. I like weird cars, not the cookie cutter, the crossover. Listen, I like cars. I like old cars. But all I'm asking for is a little bit of resurgence in that weird, quirky design. We need that back. We need cars to be weird. I think a lot of consumers and enthusiasts miss that. Just picture it, this car would be perfect for a nice sunny day, a coastal drive where you could leave the top down, enjoy the sun, find yourself at the beach, even a big city. These cars are super compact, allowing you for a tight and agile ride, getting you around anywhere you need to go, really. And when that top's down, you could imagine what that view's like. Immenseful. Now, in retrospect to me saying cars like this should come back, I do find the market for these cars quite weird or confusing, but familiar and relative, because I could totally see myself going down to the lot and leaving with one. Especially because they're not that expensive. This car would get you out of the dealership around $10,000 leaving with that thing. $10,000. That's so cool. Where are the fun, cheap cars? We need them. Now, this car had one of Honda's early 1.5 liters that got you 91 horsepower and 93 foot-pounds of torque. But the car only weighed 1,900 pounds. So with a 5-speed manual, you could expect this car to be quite fun on the road, especially those curvy ones. And it had a top speed of 134 miles per hour. That's pretty freaking high. Now, up last for weird Hondas, we have the Honda Orthia / Partner. Now, these were produced from 96 all the way to 2006. They're really weird Honda for me, mainly because the US never got any of these, and they're really only marketed for Japan. The partner did go to some other markets, but really these were Japanese cars. Now, I find these cars quite weird because these are essentially the evolved version of the Honda Civic Wagon and Honda Shuttle. And the fact that they didn't keep a four-wheel drive compact car in America kind of confuses me because in the later 90s, that's when Subaru was coming in, especially in the Sierra Nevada mountains, which is kind of like the test market for all-wheel drive vehicles. They were selling a lot of Subarus back then, so I don't understand why Honda didn't see that opportunity to sell these vehicles because they're super reliable and robust and versatile. These cars literally look like a 6th generation Civic if it had a wagon. And if you're an enthusiast and like to upgrade your cars, this is a car to upgrade because you could turn this car into anything you want. Road car, off-road car, rally. It doesn't matter. You could do it with these all-wheel drive systems. Like, I could really see Americans taking these cars and turning them into super wacky builds, lifted, off-road builds, super low to the ground road builds. I could see it. I could really see it. And the first generations of these cars were quite cool because they came with either the B18 or the B20 motor, which was famously in the Integras. The B20 was also in the CRV, so it's a pretty powerful little drivetrain. This car is going to get you 140 horsepower and 136 pound-feet of torque. Now, you could get this car with a 5-speed manual as well. They had the option. It was up to 148 horsepower with that B20 motor, 136 pound-feet of torque, and it's going to get you up to a top speed of 121 miles per hour. 0 to 60 is around 8.5 seconds, which is pretty quick for what it is. I mean, 8.5 seconds, if I reference some of the old sporty Accords that I was referencing, like, now the later models of the partner weren't so cool. These came with a really small motor at 1.5 liter called the L15A1, which only got you 118 horsepower, so a big downgrade, and a 0 to 60 in 10.1 seconds. Now, to put the cork on this last car, I just think it's weird because Honda missed an opportunity there. They should have offered this car in America. I think it would have sold quite well, especially when you look with what Subaru did in the late 90s, early 2000s with all the vehicles they were selling that were all-wheel drive. You look around, you see a lot of those Subarus. So I just think it's weird that Honda didn't offer it. Just like a lot of these other cars on the list, Honda only offered them in Japan, which to me is super corpo. And going back to the Honda EV Plus, super cyberpunk for them to do all these trial and test runs and see what, takes off. They really wanted to test the waters. I just find it very interesting that they're really ahead of the game in the 90s. Really cool. Now that's it for Weirdest Hondas, guys. Give me a follow, give me a subscription, give me a like, give me a comment. I'll reply. We're going to be making a bunch of cool videos coming up here soon. Car reviews, car talk, you name it. Give me some advice in the comments. I'm open for it all. Hate, likes, don't matter. Give me it. I'm a philosophical guy. I'm open ears. Let's hear it. But with that being it, guys, you guys have a good day, and I'll see you later.